do look forward to these opportunities, even if they are, you know, through the interwebs. And so I really, really love that you were all a part of LDI Off-Road. You're all being intentional. And I just love, I love talking specifically with people that are in different sectors of the workplace and just trying to figure out, man, how do I just follow Christ in all these different sectors of my life? And so love it. So really, really encouraged, really honored in many ways to be able to hang out with you all. Again, I wish it were more of like we're all sitting on a couch in a living room setting, but this will maybe in time, maybe in time. So kind of give you a little bit of a format for the night. This is going to be pretty informal. And so as much as uh, finances obviously was the topic, maybe to give a little bit of preface, which we'll kind of keep coming back to. My goal in some ways, which might sound weird, is actually to talk about finances very little, and more so to actually talk about your life, or how God has positioned you, and the passions He's given you, the values He's instilled in your heart, and how He's worked in your life, and then where He's kind of leading you, and then in response to that, how do your finances kind of like follow in many ways that again they're more postured as simply a resource moving you in the direction that God is leading you versus something that you're aiming toward or trying to attain. So in many ways the hope and goal of tonight is just to kind of take a moment to, I don't want to make it sound like kind of super meta, but like just look at your life a little bit and spend some time in reflection there. And then again, kind of hitting on the finances piece that comes with it. So one practical thing is, since there's a little bit of a smaller group, we're going to try to keep this pretty interactive. And so one of the, from my understanding, you guys have different cohorts that you met with, and hopefully you had the opportunity to kind of go through some of the prep work that I was able to give you. And some of those were just basically a lot of videos of different people. And so one of the questions that I asked that hopefully you talked through in your cohorts was, after going through those videos, which was there a story or a person that really kind of resonated with you specifically, and kind of why? And so I'd love to just kind of open that back up to kind of the larger group. And so I'm gonna share a little bit about myself. So, but I just wanted to kind of say I'm going to ask that soon. So for the internal processors, or if you're like, I have to remember what any of that was, you can just mute me, bring up the links, watch them real quick, whatever you need to do. But love to just hear from a few of you, some of your takeaways from that. So yeah, to start, I'd love to kind of just share a little bit of my story. Again, these are kind of the fun opportunities. Feel like there's a lot of with community that's not only being known, but also to know. And so I want to, I'm not, I tend to be a little bit more of the behind the scenes guy. And so want to share just a little bit of my background as well. So I grew up small town, Minnesota. So directly west of here. So if you kind of take here in the Twin Cities and look on a map to the South Dakota border and snag the midpoint, that's basically where I grew up. I grew up on a farm. And so my graduating class was 41 people. So thumbs up if anyone has lower than that. Anyone? Oh, all right, Matt. All right, you all right? Hey, some small town folk. Hey, Matt, 20, love it. Okay, all right. So you guys get my feelings. So yeah, coming to the big city. Whoa, I mean that was big time. So yeah, grew up small town Minnesota. A little bit of my spiritual walk too. So I mean, in most two. What? There's got to be a story. What's the story there? Homeschool sibling. That's funny. So in much like small town Minnesota or small town Minnesota culture, we had had more bars and churches than we did stalks of corn, as it seemed at times. And so I grew up in a very church going family, but it didn't. I think the best way I've been able to sort of analogize it, I think it's C.S. Lewis that talks about or uses the analogy of like a dimmer switch in regards to his faith journey versus a light switch, of saying like, I can't really identify this one aha moment of which I feel like kind of came to fully understand the Lord and understand what the gospel meant in my life. But it kind of seemed like this dimmer switch that was ever growing that really in many ways climaxed over my time in college. So again, small town Minnesota, came to the Twin Cities and attended the University of Minnesota. And that's where, I would say, if you think different eras, I would say my relationship with the Lord started for really the first time. I think before then, the best way I've been able to describe it is that I think I understood Christ as Savior, but I didn't really understand him as Lord. So I think I knew a lot of the Sunday school answers of Christ died for my sins. I think I understood the element of what the cross was, but I don't think I really understood how that actually applied or meant to my daily life or daily living. So that was until college, where I started getting connected through campus ministry, crew at the time, as well as then simultaneously getting involved at Hope at the University of Minnesota, like I mentioned. And yeah, just I know for many people, college, and my story was no different. Of college was just a really significant time of, I think, sort of trying to figure out what I believe. Not wanting to necessarily just go with what I've been told or what I was told growing up, but actually take some time to personally reflect and think about that. And then the same way, God really works at your life in crazy ways too. So I was an accounting major, and I was actually working with a accounting firm downtown. If anyone, any accounting types in the room? No. Okay, so it's what they call one of the big four, PricewaterhouseCoopers. If any of you are familiar at least with that name. So I was working with them and was on trajectory to go full time with them after graduation. And in many ways, I've always been a bit of a planner. So I had I joke about it, but I legitimately had a 50-year plan. It was pretty laid out. It wasn't overly detailed, but it hit like the significant, like, all right, I'll hit partner here. And then, it gave some of the general roadmap pieces that I wanted to achieve. And in between my, it have been my, my junior and senior year, a lot of my life kind of crumbled, just to be real. A lot of my close friends, many of whom basically kind of came and I sort of journeyed with me in my walk toward Christ. A good portion of that friend group basically just said, "Hey, we don't believe in any of this," and just kind of turned away. And so that kind of rocked my world. I got this prestigious job that I really wanted at this public accounting firm, and I just hated it. One of my other best friends, his dad just left his mom, and so he basically had to go be home and take the year off from school just to kind of care for his family and kind of function as dad. That sort of walked out. And then the girl that I was dating for 2.5 years, of whom I had the ring picked out and knew when I was going to propose, ended up breaking up with me. And for the first time in life, all the items that were on that 50-year plan all of a sudden sort of disintegrated kind of before my eyes. And so that led to a really dark time, but a lot of and looking back, a lot of good came from just, all right, God, it's just me and you right now. And I'm sure many of you have similar moments or similar, not same specifics, but similar items where like you just kind of came to that moment where like, all right, God, here's my life. And it's just, again, it's just me and you. And so really took some time to reevaluate where I was going in my trajectory. And what's funny is I was always one of the more prominent voices of people. This sounds bad. Don't tell anyone this, or at least not my coworkers. But I was one of the big ones that always said, "Don't go into ministry. Like you need to like be in the workforce." Like I know what people think of the people in ministry, because I was one of those, and they just think they're like irrelevant. Like, you guys are just weirdo whack jobs. It's like I want to be one of those accountants that like actually sits with the other accountants and develops relationships and sees what God does there. So I was pretty adamant on kind of being that voice more often than not. And but yeah, in this time again, I had a pretty much a blank slate of life, and said, I don't know, God, what you want me to do or what I should do. And at that point, there was no fortune cookie from heaven. There was no great epiphany. All I knew is, all right, God, I know there's needs around the world, and I have the capability and the freedom right now in this season and this time to probably be able to do things more so than I will maybe later in life. So ended up actually going overseas and spending a year in Turkey over with Crew specifically, the campus ministry I was involved in. From there, just was more aware of my own need for growth and development in my walk with Christ. And so obviously being a hopester, I knew of LDI. And so ended up coming back after that year in Turkey and doing the Trek One LDI program with a full intent, actually, of just going back into public accounting. And around the time near the end of that, the previous, I think her title was Director of Administration, can't remember, at Hope. Basically, the lady that was overseeing a lot of the administrative, financial side of Hope, she was having her third kid and just looking to transition on, and kind of a door opened and of kind of joining staff at Hope and saying, yeah, would this be kind of a good fit to kind of use some of maybe more business background, and started that originally just as a part-time gig, and then it became full-time, and then eventually just kind of evolved and whatnot into again joining the pastoral staff, and then being at Hope now for about 11 years, which is super crazy. But in that, my heart is always, in a weird way, still in the, I don't know, we call it the workforce, or the, the larger economic space. I'm the type that, like, I have a notebook that's full of like just random ideas of like, oh man, again, don't tell anyone this, but if I got fired tomorrow, here's like the top 3 things I would do, or like try kind of a little bit of that entrepreneurial itch of loving to create. And I think, again, God instills his creative ability and or his creative characteristics in all of us, and some do that with violins and paintbrushes, and some of us do it with spreadsheets and solving problems and how you fix problems and make it economically viable. So again, that's why I love this space primarily, and being with you all. So again, kind of a longer spiel of kind of my background. But again, it's just fun to hopefully try to get to know some of you. And so I'm married. They're big pieces. I met my wife at Hope. We have 3 kiddos with 1 on the way. And so when that kiddo comes, we'll have, not for long, but we'll have 4 and under for about a couple months, but then it'll be 4, 5 and under. So you can pray for us. So that our life is great. So Matt, we are our life, our family is very appreciative for what you do. That green Lucky Charms milk is, that's the catnip here that we try to utilize on many occasions. So again, appreciate that. But great. So again, kind of a little pathway of what we're going to do for this evening. And again, we'll use the time, and if it allows, or end early, or whatever it needs to be. Again, the hope and desires is for this to be a little bit more informal. The what we're going to do is we're going to spend a little bit of time going through just passages of scripture, just to kind of prepare our hearts and minds a little bit. And then we're really just going to basically, as I mentioned, talk more about your life and how God has wired you, what he's doing in your life. We're going to spend probably a good portion more so talking about that. And then sort of toward the end, transitioning a little bit more to the financial piece of like, all right, now amidst that, and now you have these finances, what do you do? And what are maybe some questions or guiding things from that? So but start the question that I kind of prepped you. Hopefully, internal processors gave you enough time to share. Yeah, again, we went through those videos that had you kind of share of just, again, different people and different smatterings of different occupations, and talking through, yeah, what does it look like to use what God has given me, whether that's finances, my talents, my time. And so, yeah, just love to open it up and hear from you all on, yeah, which one of those maybe resonated with you, or any kind of big takeaways that you all experienced from that.
I was going to mention one that my cohort and I had talked about for probably like 20 minutes of our time last week. It was the New York couple, a little bit older couple that I think how the wife described it. They basically, when they were just married and like just starting to work, they said like, we want to be generous with what we have, and all of that. And as I got older and got to more middle age, they kind of looked up and like, it's like, oh, like they kind of looked up and realized that they hadn't done that. And the wife, I think she said that like scared her really. And they kind of turned around and saw how, not just with finances, but with their time and their house, they were able to kind of be generous with what they had um, uh, towards others. I forgot what exactly they did, but I just remember that one sticking out to me, and I was talking about it as a cohort.
It's great. Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing it. Others?
There was one where a doctor had talked about she was giving generously, so living a good life, but just kind of still feeling empty. And after traveling abroad and seeing different communities, she wanted to give more, and not just in her time of going over and being a doctor in a third world country for a few months, but come back and quote unquote be a doctor that lives off the salary of like a nurse. And so she had kind of capped like at what a standard nurse's salary is. I'm gonna give the rest of it away to local causes or overseas or whatever it may be. And she said like that finally gave her the freedom to live the life that she wanted to, but living off of financially less, but feeling more fulfilled.
Totally. Totally. Well, it's great. Great. Others? Anyone else?
I think from the Tim Keller video, there is one line that stood out, which is, money itself isn't an idol, but money reveals our idols. And he off that line, but that line in particular definitely stood out, just in terms of how easy it is to like villainize money itself. That's like not the root issue. It's actually like our heart behind how we use it and what we can learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
I think my wife and I were both pretty moved by the video of the couple who the wife ended up giving part of her liver to the guy with, I forget what condition he had, but something like terminal.
Mm-hmm.
And like both, they didn't, like, especially the wife didn't anticipate that she would, that being generous meant giving part of her body that she may not ever get back to this man who I think they said he would end up getting 10 years of life, like 10 years more, worth of life with his family, his kids, and that was worth it to them. And the husband knowing that, what might happen to her. Like, I think, I forget the line, but he said, I may one day may not have my wife anymore because this procedure is so significant. So
yeah,
that was pretty striking.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, no, I had my box of tissues very, very readily available on that one. Yeah, multiple, both. Yeah, both positions, the potential fear and loss of the husband and kind of processing through that, as well as the man on the gratitude side of like, oh geez, man, if you can give for that guy to be able to say like, you gave me 10 more years plus potentially with my family. It's like, oh man, yeah, slayed me. It's good. It's good.
Yeah, I remember on that one, I think that was the first video I watched, and just thinking that, oh, yeah, like giving money seems a lot easier than doing something like that. And then I think the next video, was the doctor who was then giving away 75% of her salary, and I was like, okay, that's really hard too.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess all this generosity is just really hard.
Yeah. Love that you said that, because that's, we're gonna kind of come back to that a little bit later tonight. But yeah, I'm hoping that the again, the options where it's like either I give you a bunch of spreadsheets to look over, or we have just hear about real people who are just trying to process through the exact same things that that you all are, and thinking through, okay, what has God given me, and how do I use that, and how do I be a good steward of that? And my assumption for all of you, and that I'm just very explicitly coming in with, is that all of you want to look back on your life with no regrets, right? And regrets in the sense of like, oh man, if only I had invested in Doggy Coin and GameStop. It's like you can have there's regrets like that, but like looking back and saying, oh, I don't have any regrets. Given the situation I was in, the circumstances that were going on, I sought wisdom as best I could, and I made the best decision I could. And yeah, I followed Christ and felt like I was taking the path of faithfulness. And so, and my contention with that also is that that is not just a pipe dream, like that actually is an attainable goal to have, where you can say that and look back and say that about your life. Now the lie though is, I think it's you can't do that passively. It just there's no easy path in that. It does take a lot of work. It's really hard. It's you're swimming in a river that's going another direction, and so it's laborious in the sense. It is hard work. But again, at the same time, as hopefully a lot of those videos shared, it's like, man, you wouldn't choose anything else. Right? So so yeah, even a lot of this and kind of goes off to our what we're going to talk about with tonight is even a kind of a slight, I don't know where all of you are at, and I don't know again, don't know all of you personally, but I'm in my 30s, and one of my goals and hopes and prayers is to remove midlife crises from the Christian life. Like that's like one of my, if I could put up a pillar, it's like, man, yeah, if we could live in such a way that just doesn't happen. So yeah, I can't remember if it was Matt or Eric, if you guys referenced the couple from New York, right? Like, what if we lived in such a way that it didn't take this like significant moment of disconnect to then drive us to change? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna spend a little bit of time in a passage of scripture, specifically Ephesians 5. So I'm gonna actually post the passage over in the chat, because I'm gonna preface it a little bit, but then I'm going to let Paul shoot you guys over into breakout rooms to actually kind of read through the passage, and just and we're not going to spend a lot of time, but just casually, what stands out? What does it make you think of? What observations do you make? And so, Paul, maybe if we do groups of 3, maybe just to prep you. But again, so the book, so we're going to be doing Ephesians 5, just verses 15 through 20. If you're all familiar with the book of Ephesians, I like it because it's 6 chapters, and I think it follows somewhat of a logical framework that I like, where really you kind of have the first 3 chapters, which are all very gospel heavy, and then the last 4 are a lot of application. And so chapters 1 very much like God chose you and how amazing is that, and chapter 2 is God chose you for really no reason other than he just chose you. It wasn't anything by what you did. And then chapter 3 is like, and God's intent and love is for all people, not just like a select few. And then again, from chapters 4 on, it kind of transitioned to some very just practical nuggets. So that's kind of where this chapter falls. So I'm just going to give you probably a handful of minutes. And so, yeah, so Ephesians 5, 15 through 20, we'll just let you discuss it in a group, and we'll come on back. So let Paul hit the magic button.
Here we go. Oh, wait a minute. It's got old ones? I want to do it random. Oh my goodness.
Oh no.
You can do that, Paul.
I know. I feel like it should
Click
assign. There we go. Wait, why is it doing this?
recreate. Click recreate.
Oh, hold on.
Don't assign a minute.
We're going to end up, John, we're going into rooms too, so have fun. That's what it was. Just throw me off. I guess I'm the only one that doesn't get to go in a room.
I jumped out.
Oh, okay.
I didn't want them to.
Yeah.
No one wants a facilitator in their group.
I have to leave. I have to leave Allison in because she's one of 3, and so
Oh,
um
Allison.
I did not know that you had the 4th locked and loaded already.
The 4th locked and loaded. What do you mean the
4th
4th?
kid.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, man. We probably have. I mean, I'm not huge social media, or
We don't. Yeah,
do
we don't.
sometimes, but
We just haven't seen each other. But that's
yeah.
how far along is Katie?
Just entering second or probably a little bit in second trimester here. So due date is mid-October.
Nice.
So yeah. So yeah, the joke was we got married. She, I wanted 2, she wanted 4, so we're compromising and having
Yeah.
4.
That makes sense. Did you guys find out? I can't remember if you can yet or not.
We actually are running Tuesday. Tuesday we find out. We find out gender.
If it's
so.
a boy, we're talking 4. That was my my like high school dream. Oh, we're on recording. Don't say anything you don't want.
Oh no.
Just kidding. I gotta pause it.
To one another with psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit. Sing and make music from your heart to the Lord, always giving thanks to God the Father for everything, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, the beauty of passages is often in the Captain Obvious. So the thing I love, and I always come back to with this passage, is again, starts off, be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise. So just the very Captain Obvious reality is that if there's an exhortation or if there's an encouragement to be careful then how you live, that presupposes that you need to be careful or watchful of your life. And so there's something about which I feel like the passage then later talks about that, again, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. And again, there's a lot of like, days are evil, what does that really mean? And there's a lot of trying to get some of the brass tacks of it's a little bit difficult, but best way is trying to say like you're in a current, you're in a stream, and let's just say that stream isn't necessarily leading you toward God or leading you toward godliness. That there's something about in the environment in which we live that's just constantly going to be drawing you away, that you in many ways again are going to be paddling against the current. So wanting to always ask and say, all right, no, watch your life, be very careful how you live. And again, this call to live wisely, not, which I think the desire of always asking the question, is this wise, is for me such a helpful question, because I think honestly for me my tendency is always I want to say, what's the right answer? Is this, is in this decision, what's right or wrong? And I think of it very binary a lot more so than I want to admit. I'm like, okay, I got to keep pounding in my mind that a lot of times there's not necessarily a right or wrong. Sometimes there is, it's like there's some, morals obviously come in, but if you can take, is it right or wrong, and then couple it with, all right, now, is it wise? Okay, that actually really helps frame things for me in a different light. And so in the same way, when we talk about finances, when it comes to, the practicalities, and I'm sure you've gotten bombarded with courses, or you've heard a whole lot of financial wisdom and talk telling you this is the way you should do it. And I'm not saying any of that's wrong. I'm just not saying all of it's right either, and saying that it has to be this one way or the other. But it's like, no, for you, given your circumstances, who you are, how God's wired you, add in the question, what does wisdom say? What is actually wise for you in how you handle your finances? Again, going into that specific one. So again, I think just this call to be careful, call to be watchful of your life, wanting to be mindful that the stream's going in a different direction, and just the call to constantly be wise is always a really helpful thing that I like to always continue to come back to in these conversations. So with that, I'm actually going to have you go back to groups. And again, maybe randomly, we'll just put new random people, Paul. I don't even know. Is that how it works? Will they go
I mixed it up. Man,
you're just going to be
sorry to all the
out with a whole
introverts.
bunch of new people.
Rip to every introvert. I've ruined your life, and I know it. I'm sorry.
Love it, love it. And I'll let me see, I'll post this here in the chat as well. But basically, I just want you guys to talk for a while about what keeps people from being wise with their money, finances, broaden it to resources in general. So basically just trying to unearth, when it comes to exhibiting wisdom in this area, like what are the barriers? What are the pitfalls? What are the things that make that just really, I think some of you mentioned this earlier, it's like, it's just really hard. And so I just want you guys to talk about those, brainstorm some of them, and then we'll come back and share as large group. So shoot them away, Paul.
Has made that desire really strong for me, or whatever. So it can be difficult almost to ask the question of like, is that wise or not?
Yeah.
Because you want it now.
Totally. Yeah, kind of the instant gratification. And yeah, I don't know if any of you recall from I think it was specifically the Tim Keller video when he talked about greed, right? And I think we've talked about this at Hope before, is that greed has this this terrible characteristic that you can't really see it in the mirror. You know, it's not it's very subtle, it's very hard to pinpoint, and therefore it can often go unchecked many times, even in our own hearts, right? I think for me, I am appalled at the level of greed that often resides in my heart that I'm just unaware of until some circumstance or situation or God's Spirit just very gracefully highlights it or makes it apparent to me. So great. What else?
One thing that Catherine and Lily brought up was the goal to maintain a certain lifestyle or image, or to appear to have a certain status among people, which really points to an idol of wanting to be seen as accepted. That's an unwise use of money. Yeah,
totally. Yep. As again, also I think that Tim Keller article or video highlighted just this element of money even itself at times is not, I think it was already mentioned, that is not, it's not the idol in of it itself, but it highlights the idol or highlights the idol pretty well. It kind of shows you or reveals to you what you're actually trying to put your hope in. And so yeah, status, appearance, big one. Great. Other thoughts? Or you could always share someone else's thought. If someone else had a great thought, they're like, I, as a representative, are going to speak on their behalf.
Our group talked about another thing. I'm just going to jump in with it.
Great. Thanks, Kat.
Sometimes there's lack of wisdom because there's lack of education. And I can only speak, I guess, to our culture or our country, but there's such a lack of education on financial literacy or how to save or what is the best choice. And, you know, you get a certain car because you think that's the car you need. Like, I just need a new car, the first one I get, or something like that. Or you just, this is my only loan option, so I'm going to get loans for this. And this is what I see people doing, or my parents never save for the future, so I don't know how to save for the future. And yeah, so sometimes it's just a lack of knowledge, a lack of education that can kind of hinder that wisdom or that thought through opportunity.
Totally. Well, it's great. It's great. Love it. Yeah, thanks for sharing. In so many ways, the call to want to be wise with finances, again, it can be very complex, but you know, hopefully even just through the conversation, the intent, you know, behind the curtain, reason trying to ask that is mostly just to again highlight that this is hard. You know, it's not, there's a lot of there is no path of least resistance, and if it is, it's going the different direction in many ways, as we've been talked about, like using the kind of current analogy. And so it takes work. It's hard. It takes a lot of self-evaluation. But again, the purpose of this, unlike maybe many, when you're like, oh, we're gonna talk about finances, and it's like, what's the big application point? Make a budget. We're not gonna really dance to that song right now, but I'm hoping that you guys see the value of a budget or are moving in that direction. But for those of you that maybe are very meticulous about your budget, it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of work, not only to create the thing, but then track and like keep updated on. I mean, it's not an easy process. So again, but like many things, right? In some ways, I'm sure you guys have this in a lot of different areas of your life too. And if I weren't a Christian, life would be a lot easier. If I didn't care about actually stewarding what God has given me, whoa, like all of a sudden I can just, go flippantly do whatever I want, right? I mean, it's just that hard piece of like, yeah, no, that there's just really there's this component about as being a follower of Christ and actually wanting to follow and actually follow in his ways. Like it's hard. It takes work. There's a lot of extra layers of intentionality and questions that just naturally therefore come from it. And so again, appreciate that. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of actually take even more of a bigger zoom out and just talk about, because again, a lot of people then struggle with like, okay, and I imagine many of you are in this position, right? So it's like, yeah, God has given you resources. He's given you money. He's given you other things that, again, hopefully, I'm going to make some assumptions that, intellectually we all believe and know, like, okay, God is the actual giver of those. So those actually in many ways belong to God. And I, again, am a steward of that. But I find myself just paralyzed in what to do. Like, where do I go from here? And so one of the things I want to just kind of take an opportunity to kind of zoom out is really just to, again, think about, man, how has God wired you uniquely and specifically, and what he has opportunities put in your life, what he has values he's instilled in you. And again, I think there's have you guys ever had a situation where you like create thing or think of something and you're like, this would be amazing, and then you look online and you realize someone else has already kind of done that, but like a long time ago. I had one of those moments when, because again, I do love finances. I do love a good old fashioned spreadsheet. Hear me clearly, but I think one of the things I love more so is helping people connect really their finances with their heart, and really just trying to think of like, okay, this is really what is kind of going on, or this is really what's my finances in many ways are revealing what's going on in my heart, to be consistent with Jesus' words in Matthew 6 of, there's this relationship between my treasure and my heart, and they kind of they in many ways work together. And so in that process, I love to just taking opportunities to have people zoom out and think about, and there's a lot of basically the thing I kind of created once was like, I just want to throw budgeting out the window, and I want to make this thing I want to call it values-based budgeting, where you basically take your values, you kind of take your hard items, and then you build a budget based on that. And you know what I'm getting so jazzed about, and I'm writing things down, and then I Google it, and sure enough, literally verbatim, there's something called values-based budgeting. And I'm like, well, that was all right. It felt like kind of a waste of my time. But anyway, but yeah, basically just trying to say like, what if we take some time to actually think about, and even these articles are helpful, right? Like take some time to think about what you actually value. And then given that list, how would you assume that someone would use their finances given those values? And again, even those articles, and they're not necessarily written from a biblical worldview. They're helpful, but I feel like what we have that much more so is this extra layer of, the conversation really doesn't just start with us in this conversation, right? So at the end of the day, our lives, we would say, ultimately aren't just ours to then say like, oh, well, what do you value? It's like, well, I'm not necessarily the starting point. We actually believe that God is actually the starting point of this conversation. So in many ways, the goal is, it's good to have a personal mission, personal values, but in many ways they should fall under the umbrella of sort of God's mission, God's values, and our lives being sort of a reflection or in response to that. So what I want you guys to do in groups now is what I want you guys to do is, I'm going to kind of post the question here as well. So you guys, I think when I put it in the chat, it carries with you guys over to breakouts. So if that's helpful, but basically just for you personally, kind of zooming out a little bit more, like what has been helpful for you in wrestling with how your life and therefore your finances like fits into God's mission, what God's ultimately about. So why don't you guys, spend some time talking about that. We'll come back, share a few things, and then go from there. So Paul, you want to shoot him back?
Here we go. Sorry, introverts. Let's try it. All right.
Boom. All right, I'm gonna go. Let's give him like 3 minutes, but I'm just gonna go use the restroom real quick.
Paul, I liked your.
This isn't just, hey, go follow a Dave Ramsey class and all of a sudden like, okay, well now everything's fixed. But in many ways it's like, no, this is again the hard work of just, regardless of what system you create, there's always going to be complexity, there's always going to be difficulty, and there's always going to be kind of labor in some of the decisions you have to make and how you're processing through how you're using your finances specifically, but again, as a part of stewarding kind of your broader life. And so obviously there's no better way to learn how to do that in different seasons, different ways than actually hearing from other people who are also processing and doing that in their own lives. So yeah, I would love to hear what you guys talked about, or maybe some key takeaways.
Our group talked about just overall community and how essential that is to accountability with your life and how it fits in God's mission as well as your finances. And yeah, I think just the small group settings and even our cohorts. I know our cohort met I think a week or two ago, and I was totally convicted about how I was managing my finances and how much I was giving and that kind of thing. So I think that the small group settings and connecting with other Christians about where your life is going and specifically with your finances is super important and super helpful.
Awesome. Great point. I'm going to come back to that actually a little bit later. So thank you. Other thoughts?
I think for me, when I hear the question how your life fits with God's mission, I think of like the parable of the talents, where like each servant was given so much and some of them went invested wisely and some buried it. And just looking at that as like our finances, amongst other things that God's blessed us with, are things that we should be turning back and using for his glory, not just hoarding for ourselves or to feel secure and safe and comfortable, but rather things to further God's mission. So one of the ways you can do that with finances is by giving or by using your time in some way to live generously for God to be glorified.
Mm-hmm. Great thoughts. Awesome. Anyone else? Yeah, I don't know if people have done the, obviously kind of a smattering of ideas that people have used or done. Some people I know go to the level they actually make like mission statements for themselves of sorts. Again, which I think is great. I think mission statements that sometimes it's always hard, right? You probably experience this in your businesses. It's like to have a mission statement there's always somewhat of a tension between being concise and like clear or actually like thorough. It's like, yeah, we want this super memorable, but it's like 4 words and like, what does that actually mean? And so there can be a bit of a kind of a back and forth or a little bit of tension there, but I know a lot of people, found great benefit of like, no, I've spent some time thinking through and kind of crafting some verbiage that really resonates with me on that. But another thing, if you've heard people, kind of a funny phrase or actually, I guess not a good exercise is to, what do you want people to say at your funeral is kind of a phrase that people talk about a lot of, trying to unearth, what do you want your life to be about? And specifically for me, and this kind of, I hope it's okay. This kind of moves into a little bit a more personal realm for me. But I actually thought about that a lot over the past handful of months. Again, some of you may know this, which is great. But in all that was 2020, we had some unique added additions to our family sphere, where actually this fall I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And admittedly now it sounds way worse than it currently is, which we're very thankful, praise God for that. But it led to some very dark and scary times. I'm not gonna lie, of kind of processing through that, especially when there was a lot of unknowns more so than knowns. And so again, I'm a bit of an emotional guy too, so I'm sorry if I get kind of choked up, kind of a crier, but hugs. But in that process, over the past few months, and especially in that dark time, I actually planned out my funeral, which is a very morbid thing to maybe on face value, but was actually a very, very beautiful thing. And I actually look back at that with a lot of thankfulness, in the sense that, again, the value that people, try to get out of, what do you want people to say? It's like, your funeral. Yeah, that's great. But if you take it that level deeper and actually plan it out of what you want that to be like and what you want that experience to be like and what you actually want to be highlighted, not highlighted, like it, I'll be honest, it gives you, it's hard for that not to give you amazingly singular focus. And all of a sudden, all the chaff of what you shouldn't give a rip about in life just blows away. And all of a sudden, what is left is really the core of what's important. And again, I don't necessarily know if I could have replicated it a different way, but it's different when you do it too, and you're actually, it's not just an exercise, it's actually something that at that time I was curious if this would actually come to pass. And so to round it out, I'm fine. There, not it's hard to, I don't want to like throw a bomb and then just be like, what are you okay? But yeah, my joke is in the world of brain tumors, if you were to come up to a buffet line of brain tumors and choose one, I guess this is the one you would want to choose. It's very treatable. It seems very treatable, and we caught it early on. And so I'm undergoing treatment right now. And we're very thankful. And so God has been very, very gracious to us in that. But it's, you just have those moments in life, right? Where, I know some of you in this room have had some of those like life-threatening, or very, where you've kind of come to this life divide, and a lot of God just uses that to provide a lot of clarity, and you don't want to forget those. And so those moments when you go back and think through, okay, God, what is really important? What do I want my life to be about? What do I, again, in this sense, like how would I craft my funeral? What do I want? What do I want to be left after all of this? And that as funny as it sounds, like that affects my budget. Like that affects all the way down into my finances and my checkbook. It's a very important thing. And so I don't know all of you and your circumstances and what's going on, but the thing I am more convinced of right now than anything is that God has positioned you all where you are for a reason. I can't tell you what that is. And God may not reveal that to you until the end of time. and it's not something we'll likely know, but what I take great comfort in, and I again know beyond a doubt, is that God has you and has postured you and has positioned you right where you are for a reason, both in your job, in your life circumstances, with the resources that you have, and that is for a reason. And I'm convinced that no one person can be passionate about everything that's worthy of passion in this life, right? So God may have instilled on your heart something that seems very unique or isn't universally shared with other people, some injustice, some way in which you see the gospel not spreading in some way where you God's name is not being made known. And if anything, my encouragement would just be don't take that lightly. Don't take that for granted. Because again, I fully believe that God is positioned where you are for a reason. And I think then the subsequent part is, man, no one knows what hangs in the balance with where God has positioned you. Like, I just think, man, if thinking back in my own life, my own story, I kind of shared earlier, it's like, man, there were so many people along the way that just took the time to share the gospel message with me. And right, it's like, and it obviously didn't really click until, I'm making up numbers here, but like time 12. And I just think, man, the poor schmuck who took the effort at number 2 or number 5 and never like saw anything really happen from it. But like, man, how impactful that was. Like, they had no idea what hung in the balance of the steps that they took. And so, yeah, kind of in that similar vein, like, yeah, hopefully be encouraged, but also, when it comes to our finances, be thinking through and just, yeah, again, where God has wired you, where God has made you, God has made you passionate about. If anything, I just want to say, yeah, don't take that lightly. Fan that flame, find that flame in many ways. I see a hand. Is that a feature? I didn't even know. Is that
That's me. Jon,
Lindsay?
Hey.
Lindsay. I didn't even know you were on this. You must have been on my second scroll of Zoom or whatever
I was tardy, but thanks for calling me out on that. But
and you're just on my other page.
Yep. So anyway, when you were talking about kind of your legacy and that sort of thing, I think the one thing I was thinking about was, I'm sure when you're having that conversation, you're not thinking to yourself, man, I really wish I would have invested more in airlines before it tanked, or, like after it tanked before it came back up. Like, and so one of the things I'm kind of reflecting on is like, there's so much in our culture around control, independence, like, and like so much guilt around like investing, right? Like saving and investing. But like, really, if you think about your legacy, it's more like generosity, right? Like, whether it's like they gave to the church, fine, like maybe that's not going to be spoken at your funeral, but like, oh, they treated me, they always had me over, right? I always felt welcome, like, you know what I mean? Those kinds of like generous living. And so I was just kind of reflecting and like challenged by like, what is, and we had a previous section in OffRoad around like contextualization and like the waters that we're swimming in our culture, specifically around money. And that is one of them. We should save, we should invest in the stock market, you know what I mean? And if not, we're not in a good spot. So I'm just kind of like thinking that through in light of what you were saying, and how we need to kind of keep that in check with our investments too.
Yeah, no, totally. And this is where it's, this is definitely Jon, not the Lord, right? This is what God's doing in my own heart right now. And that's where, again, the Spirit, I trust, I bank on the Spirit's working in all people's life a lot more. But I think for me there, it's multifaceted in clearly, the verbiage that some people use is like, if you were to die tomorrow, how would you live? And it's like, that's not a helpful question and a false dichotomy that doesn't work, because again, I'm not trying to be that guy, but I literally was like, there's sometimes like, maybe I am going to die tomorrow. And that is actually going to drastically change how I live than if I'm going to live another 5 years, 10 years, 12 years, 50 years, right? You don't know. So there's always going to be a tension because we don't know the numbers of our days. That's just not something. And so for me, the posture became much more of like, how would I live today if I'm going to die tomorrow? And that's for me, it's like, today I'm going to live as submissive to Christ leading as I can, and regardless of whatever circumstances that is. And so it was a little bit of there's like a bit of a different mindset, because I don't want to make it sound like saving's bad. I think there's a lot in, but I do think that if you are painting a very broad brushstroke, and trying to zoom out and say, again, using generalities, what I feel like has happened is culturally we've come through a season culturally, and then therefore also then for in sort of Christian subculture where people were just out of control with their money, right? And it was just consumeristic, and it was spending, people getting a lot of terrible situations, racking up debt. And I think therefore you had the pendulum saw that the pendulum was too far to the extreme over here, and so then the pendulum tried to bring it back to center, but like always happens whenever you have really anything, the pendulum swings too far the other way, where now the mantra and what's celebrated often is save, 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 save. And so what gets often highlighted and sometimes giving is thrown on there or lobbed on there, but it lacks a lot of practical being, it's not highlighted as much. It's not, there's not practicality in its even specific teaching. So like one thing I like to walk through people with is like, how do you actually create a budget for giving? Like, it's like, yeah, there's actually different forms of giving. Like there's actually different ways to do that. But again, it just seems like that's not as readily talked about or thought about. And so, and I if you were to, typically they say like, people are divided in financing or in their finances either between savers or spenders. And I consider myself even a recovering saver, because I actually think those in the spending realm actually have more aligned with givers than the savers, because the those that spend and maybe those that give tend to have a little bit more openness with their finances than the savers do. And so yeah, and then there's just a lot that gets wrapped up in that. I don't know if I have a lot of friendships and connections with the FIRE community. I don't know if any of you even know what that means, the Financial Independence Retire Early community, if that's something that, but basically it's a lot of like just heavy frugality, lower your expenses, increase your income to get a point where you can retire at 32. But then my question is always, why? Like what's the retirement in itself is maybe even something it should be a conversation to talk about versus sort of an expectation. And so there's all this push in this direction. And again, I'm not saying that's bad. I just think that, anytime you have the extremes of the bell curve, I think there are times to be mindful. And that's where I think wisdom plays in far more than that. So anyway, sorry, I started rambling. I don't even know if that was aligned with anything that you were saying, but it just made me think of it. So love it. All right, so just to keep moving forward here. Yeah, so just again, a helpful exercise, which I would encourage you all to do at some point, is to actually do maybe continue the conversation in some ways, either with your cohort or even just if it's individually with you personally, of like, yeah, what do I want my life to be about? What are the values? What do I see are God's values in Scripture? And then how am I actually using my finances in response to those, in sort of a worshipful response? And then we talked about with the Tim Keller, but the challenge I would have, and this is a really hard thing, but print out your most recent credit card statement, print out your most recent bank statement, and take those values, and then take your statement and then say, okay, if I didn't know anything about me, and I just got this statement, what would I say that this person values if I just got this data, and see how those line up? And maybe they will. And again, this isn't to spend shame. I don't think that's ever helpful, and it's not or save shame, kind of going the other extreme as I just kind of finished talking about. But I think it just leads you to actually be like, no, I actually need to evaluate, where is my money actually going, and how does it line up with what I claim to say that I want? And when there are differences there, do I have the humility and to just say like, okay, yeah, I'm not living aligned with the ideal that I'm trying to uphold. And then you just make adjustments. And again, it's not something to be out of guilt. It's just something that you highlight, you realize, and then you adjust. Being that it appears that I'm probably a little older than many of you, your entire life is going to be constant adjustment, just so that you kind of know and are prepared for that. You'll never reach perfect balance. And if you do, it'll be like, maybe like 0.12 seconds, and then it'll get out of balance, or it'll get whacked up in some other ways. And then, kind of like a pendulum, it'll go too far the other way, and then you got to readjust, and then, you'll be perfect for like, again, another 1.2 seconds, and then it'll go too far this way, and then you'll readjust. And that is just going to basically be life. And so be okay with that. Give yourself grace in that. That's a very, very okay thing. And so, the only other practical thing I would encourage, and this was already mentioned, but would love to highlight it again, is, and I think this was actually in one of the videos, which is honestly really impactful for me. And so one of the videos, I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, hopefully I did send this one, but was a group of guys from, I think, Harvard or Stanford or whatnot, but they basically chose to say, hey, we kind of live in a society where like finances are kind of a taboo thing, and we want to we know that on our hearts we may have a tendency to greed or self-justification, or going down a lifestyle path that we don't want to. And so we're just going to have a basically open books policy with this group of people, and we're going to have sort of annual, I think they call them board meetings, where they do that. And I remember seeing that for the first time and kind of being blown away and thinking like, oh my goodness, some people actually do that. And so a group of 3 of us, friends from college, who've managed to be able to, and been blessed to be able to stay involved with each other in our lives through the years, we basically do that. We have kind of an open books policy, and with each other. And I'm not gonna lie, it was scary as all get out, and it still is. I wish I could come before you as like the amazing pastor who has all the sin worked out in his life and doesn't happen to still have greed that takes over the deep recesses of his heart. That's just definitely not the case. It's like, no, it's really hard, and it's very humbling at times. But man, can I tell you, it is probably one of the most freeing things I've ever done in our financial world. Like, to know that there are other people who are involved in our financial situation. So even right now, this goes a much longer story short, but we're in the process right now of potentially moving. And we have a situation right now, to kind of add on to some of the 2020 nuances for our lives. But both my, not to get into all the details, but both of my in-laws, so it'd be my wife's parents, both have some pretty significant health issues. One of which was just diagnosed over this fall as well, and life expectancy pretty shortened, more like to the 3 to 5 years, or 3 to 8 years. And so my wife's a nurse. We've always had some desire, especially in that, to want to be there and present in those, to try to keep them on a long-term care as much as we can, and be helpful in that. And so been trying to figure out, like, what does this mean? We got, again, a whole set of parents that have hard health issues. What do we even do? And opportunity, kind of, again, long story short, came up to acquire this house actually in our neighborhood that sits on technically a double lot that we could, in a sense, and potentially build a small cottage for them in the back. But there's a lot of like weird nuances to that, and I got to work with the city and the county. And honestly, it basically is like, we're spending way more money than I ever thought on I ever would on a house. and it freaks me out. But I have this group right now who I can be like, hey, here's the deal. Here's the situation. Here's it all. You know what we're trying to do. You know our situation. You know our finances. Like, can you just help me process through? And I remember thinking, like, after one of the phone calls with all those guys, and I remember thinking, God, what would I do if I didn't have these guys? Like, who would I talk to about this? Like, I get it. Obviously, Katie and I, again, Katie's my wife, so we'd have good dialogue between there, but there's so much, like, this is so complex, and I consider myself, I got a master's in self-justification, so I'm really good at convincing myself that of really doing anything, but posturing it in such a way that's like, oh man, yeah, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, like, yeah, I think you really deserve that Tesla. Yeah, I think that actually helps the gospel go forward by you buying that Tesla. It's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I could still convince myself of that. So yeah, just having a group of people that can know me, kind of cut through the bull, honestly, but yet still know our hearts, and are going to encourage us, and not necessarily make the decision for us, but we'll be advisors in that, and make it not feel like we're completely alone. And so it's a really freeing, really freeing thing. So again, sorry that was a little bit longer spiel than anything, but so yeah, so I'm gonna give you just one little last stint here in your groups, and all I want you to do is just process, or it could be one of the examples that was given, or just other things that you've heard, but like, what are ways, you're like, oh, copy and paste here. What helps people be wise with their money? Or in other ways, what could be helpful for you? So basically, just try to get more practicality, but like, yeah, if God were to leave you here tonight with one practical thing that you could do to move toward wisdom with your finances, what would that be? Or what could that be here for tonight? So let's go into our groups, and then we'll come back. All right, I think everyone's back. Great. Yeah, just love to hear some kind of takeaways. What was something that someone wouldn't mind sharing?
Hey, it's Lindsay again. So one thing I was gonna put in the chat jokingly is like marriage, right? So like my marriage really helped kind of shape and bring that accountability, have these discussions. I really like, John, what you're saying too around that. I think it was Harvard that they did that group. I think that Harvard, accountability is huge. But I think one thing, like when we got married, David's also what'd you say, a recovering saver? That's David. And so like very frugal and conservative with finances. And me, on the other hand, was like, don't track money, have enough of it, and then generous, right? Like I loved giving. And so that can create conflict and clash. But I think where we got to like a really good like point is, for us, it's like, let's be conservative, let's be frugal, let's live on one car, let's live in an area that's not like with like compatible with our salaries. Let's live on one salary rather than two. Like, let's do these things, but then let's still give above and beyond. And so it was kind of, for me at first, I was like, I have no desire to like live and save money. But if we're doing it so that we can give more, then I'm all on board, right? And so like I found that like that marriage, that going through that was like the accountability piece that kicked it off. And now I'd say we're at the point now where we need more accountability outside of just him and I, because then you start to justify it of like you're saying, well, maybe we should work really hard and make a ton of money now so we could both retire young and go into missions, right? Like, so you can justify, like you're saying, justify anything. So I think for me initially, it's like that marriage piece was great, but then how do you build out a community of people that like want to live different, want to live in different areas, even though that's not in their like income level, right? Want to live on one car, want to have a roommate downstairs, like just live different because I don't know, why not, So anyway.
Totally. Yeah, and that's great. As much as and this is the one thing, for those of you that maybe done Dave Ramsey, I think he does well is he really tries to make you feel money and like just that element. And I think for me, what was always helpful is, again, why this idea originally of like trying to do it like always try to connect my spending and how I'm using my money to my values, is that I start feeling sort of the opportunity cost, for lack of a better word. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna put my money over here, but then I know, and I'm not like in my mind I can think of, and then also then get down to my heart, feel that this is actually then taking money away from another potential value, and then I actually get to do the hard work of processing of like, all right, well, what does wisdom say? How does that play into this? Great. Other thoughts, other kind of key takeaways. Or just one to wrap, to bring us home.
I hate silence, so I'm
Kara, there you
I hate
go.
silence just kills me. Okay. One thing that our group was talking about, two of us kind of touching on it from different angles, but how talking about finances, some like depending on how you grew up talking about them, it might be like something you don't talk about with people, or you only talk with like your parents or something. And I think at the end of the day, you always want to talk about it with like trusted people. You don't just want to like walk around and spitting out numbers at left and right. But the more you keep it in, the more it can almost become like an idol of many different forms, whether that's like control or secrecy, or I don't know, just it can grow in ways that you probably don't want it to. And how then like kind of demystifying the power that you have over finances by talking about it with people, how that could be helpful just in being more wise with how you manage it. That's all.
Love it. Great. Beautiful. What a perfect comment to land the LDI off-road plane for all of eternity, it sounds.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Great. Was there I know, Paul, we kind of said if we wanted to open up for a little bit of Q&A. I did see, so Kelly, you had a note about the budget giving. I'd love to send that. Actually, if you want to even just shoot me your email, because I actually have a little bit something that's written up. Basically, it's not overly complicated, which is, I try to, like, I'm a simple person. I need simple things, but kind of the larger umbrella is basically transitioning your budget. How do I say this? That doesn't sound terrible until you understand what I'm trying to say. Basically throwing a budget out the window and actually creating what I call an automated budget, which basically says, hey, before money even comes into your bank account that you use to then actually build a budget off of, money basically starts going into these separate accounts. And then one of those accounts actually being a premeditated account and amount, and it's in a sense basically putting money into that account, and then obviously then taking your money out of that, or taking your utilizing that for your actual giving, and then dividing that up into certain categories again, I have some suggested ones that I like to tell people to think through, but then basically just trying to set it aside first versus, oh, yeah, I was at the checkout aisle and they asked if I wanted to donate $1 to Children's Memorial Hospital. Okay. Oh, good. I feel good now. I feel good. I gave. Man, I'm a giver. So anyway, just trying to bring more intentionality into the process. But feel free to send me an email, or I can share it with anyone else who would have desires for that. But
Love it. Big fan of automated giving.
I know. I love automation in many ways.
Great. Thanks, John. Round of applause for John as he lands, as he said, the LDI off-road plane. Guys, this is the end of this ministry. And man, we thank God for everything he's done through it. Thank God for all of you for being a part of it. Do me the one favor, of course, as mentioned at the top. Click that link in the chat and go RSVP if you haven't yet. RSVP yes or no, right? Don't just, if you're not coming, don't do anything because we need to know how much food to buy. And then I would just add one more thing. Anybody else that, well, two things now that I thought of it. Anyone else that wants to hear from John on the budget for giving, John at hopecc.com, right, John?
Okay. Yep. Let me put the chat.
And then lastly, as we are wrapping up, and I'll say more at the year-end celebration, which you should all come to, it's going to be the best, is very thankful for you all for doing this year, especially with the fact that it was virtual pretty much the entire time. It was challenging, but you stuck it out, and that's the kind of faithfulness that God can use. And so with that being said, you guys are the leaders at Hope and the future leaders at Hope and beyond. And so let's not just stop here at LDI Off-Road. We're going to this new format where we're taking the barriers away from LDI classes. So that includes systematic theology, for example, which Catherine, who's on the call, has done, and biblical theology. This fall, I'm teaching a class on the Trinity. That's going to be mind-blowing for everyone, including me, because that doctrine is just unreal sweet. But I really challenge all of you to, when that information starts coming out about LDI classes and retreats and seminars being offered, to be the first in line to sign up for those and to keep stewarding your faith and keep growing, keep being developed, because that's why we took those barriers away. We want people to be developed as leaders. And so that's the last charge. John, would you mind just praying for us, and then we can call it an evening?
Love to.